Kicking off this list, Bird Box. Upon the release of the 2018 Netflix movie Bird Box, it received a humongous amount of hype around it, and for good reason, because it had a very interesting concept where you have a group of survivors who wear blindfolds to prevent themselves from being infected by this mysterious supernatural force, because once you take the blindfold off, you instantly die. The movie was such a massive hit for Netflix as it became their most viewed movie in its first week. It produced a shit ton of memes. There was even that infamous Bird Box challenge. And it also had a pretty stellar cast, including the likes of Sandra Bullock, Trevante Rhodes, Sarah Paulson, Lil Rel Howery, B.D. Wong, and even the amazing John Malkovich. However, with all of that aside, did this movie exceeded expectations? Sort of, but not entirely. I do understand why most people hated this movie. Yeah, it wasn't as good as it was in the books. I do feel like they could have done a lot more with its brilliant concept. The plot structure was a bit frustrating, and the pacing wasn't exactly the best. But even with its flaws, Bird Box is a movie that I think is just fine, or probably like even, solid at best, in my opinion. Bullock did such a splendid job as a strong put-upon protagonist, doing everything she can to keep her family from being ripped apart. And also Trevante Rhodes, who made such a great, likable, empathetic, supporting character as Sandra Bullock's love interest. With their amazing chemistry, together they made such an easy to root for pairing, as they were characters that I genuinely cared about and wanted them to succeed in the end. Even with Bird Box being a movie that hadn't really lived up to everybody's expectations, it's a movie that I've always enjoyed it for what it was, as I think it's overall very fun to watch. For the next entry, Armageddon. Now, Michael Bay is a director who's been known for not making movies that you would say are great, but you can't say that he's made movies that aren't enjoyable, because that would be a humongous lie if you ask me. And when it comes to his 1998 movie Armageddon, it's definitely no exception to that. Now, does the movie contain some cringeworthy elements? Yes. Is it over the top? Of course. Does it contain a very silly plot that wouldn't really happen in real life? Yes. But goddammit, I always have a blast just watching this movie. It's a movie that never gets grating, the simplicity works in its favor, and it's packed with an ensemble cast of actors from Bruce Willis, Billy Bob Thornton, William Fichtner, Ben Affleck, Liv Tyler, Owen Wilson, Steve Buscemi, and even the late great Michael Clarke Duncan. The romance between Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler is unquestionably my favorite part of the entire movie. Those two were just so cute together because their chemistry came off to be so believable and so convincing. It'd be like if they were a real life couple. Armageddon may be a movie that may come off to be very obnoxious and weird, but it's a movie that's very rewatchable for me. For the next movie, It Chapter 2. Upon the release of It Chapter 2, it was one of the most highly anticipated movies of 2019, and for good reason. You had all of our favorite characters from the Losers Club returning in adult form, so everybody's expectations were off the roof, as most people expected it to be just as good, if not better than the first It movie. Unfortunately, after the movie's release, most of the reviews were mostly mixed to negative. Now, to be fair, I completely understand all the people who were disappointed or who didn't like this movie at all, because if you compare it to the original, yeah, it was a bit of a downgrade because it felt a bit more messy. The runtime of the film did feel a bit too long, considering the fact that it ran for nearly 3 hours. Pennywise did feel a bit underutilized, considering the fact that he had a lot more screen time in the original than he did in this movie. And the third act was very anticlimactic, considering the fact that the final battle was very underwhelming, considering the fact that Pennywise died in possibly the lamest way possible. But everything else in this movie honestly works for me. Now, people can say what they will about this movie, but one thing that cannot be denied was the castings of the adult versions of the losers. They were unquestionably the best part of the entire movie, especially with each of the adult actors who all give rock solid performances and make a remarkable resemblance to the younger selves. Like seriously, whoever was responsible for the castings of the adult versions of the losers honestly deserved a raise, because each and every single one of them nailed the younger versions of the losers, including the likes of Jessica Chastain as the adult version of Beverly, James McAvoy as the adult version of Bill, and the best of all, Bill Hader, who was unquestionably the show stealer of this entire movie as older Richie. Every scene with Bill Hader in this movie was just a home run, as he gives unquestionably the strongest performance of the entire movie, while also having the best arc out of all the characters. Plus, you also have Bill Skarsgård, who still killed it as Pennywise, even with all the limited screen time he had in this movie. And I also really liked the ending. Even though the final battle against Pennywise was a disappointing mess for the most part, the subsequent scenes that end the movie managed to close the book on this story in a relatively satisfying and unexpectedly emotional manner. While sure, it's not the ending that fans of the books may have been hoping for, but it did feel like a true ending to the characters. Even with It Chapter 2 not being as good as it was in the first, the ending does a solid job of bolstering their bond while also confirming the enormity of what they all have been through. While It Chapter 2 may have failed to exceed everybody's expectations, and while I do feel like it could have been better, but goddamn it, I'd be lying if I say I don't always have a great time rewatching this movie. For the next movie, Pain and Gain. Oh look, another Michael Bay movie that I've always enjoyed. Now on paper, Pain and Gain is a movie that I really should despise. Why, you ask? Well, most like Michael Bay movies, Pain and Gain is noisy, over the top, excessive, brash, and deeply rooted in macho chauvinism. But the thing that makes Pain and Gain different from all of his movies is that it enters into the realm of satire. Although I completely understand why this movie is hated because of the fact that Michael Bay displayed like a more comedic approach to this movie that was based on the true story about bodybuilders who committed deplorable crimes, from money laundering, kidnapping, and even murdering people on the name of trying to make money. But I do believe that Michael Bay's style really blended well with this movie. Now the humor is somewhat dicey because of the fact that it's a movie based on a true story about people who committed deplorable murders because, murder's not funny. But I don't know, it just works for me because I always found it to be funny. And plus, you have a very stellar cast. Mark Wahlberg has never been better as the wannabe criminal mastermind that's almost too stupid and a motivational speaker inspired to be real. Anthony Mackie does a pretty stellar job as another dumbass criminal that's so vain that he's willing to inject steroids onto himself to look better. And you also have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who possibly gives the greatest performance of his career in this movie, which is honestly saying something considering the fact that he's always been criticized for playing like the same character in like every movie that he's in. Like he legit showed his acting range in this movie, which is something I really wish he would do more often. Pain and Gain is a movie that may not be great in any capacity, but it's a movie that I have always enjoyed it for what it was, even despite how stupid it can be. For the next movie on the list, Home. I'll never forget watching Home for the first time in theaters back in 2015 and having such an absolute blast. But one thing I didn't understand is all the hate and critiques that it received upon its release. I absolutely loved the characters of O and Tip. Their friendship was easily the beating heart of this entire film. And I never ever thought in my wildest dreams that Rihanna and Jim Parsons, aka Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, would make such a fantastic duo. After rewatching the interviews the two had during the release of Home, they just blended so well with each other because of the way how they just had such amazing chemistry. The two of them made such a great pair that you'd think that they've been longtime friends. Home is a movie that may not be for everybody, but it's a film that I find very endearing as it's all about friendship and just being yourself, and honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And for the last movie on the list, Spider-Man 3. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I used to be one of the biggest haters of Spider-Man 3. I'll never forget how truly disappointed I was when I saw it for the first time because of how much I hold the first two movies dear to my heart. But as time went on, the more I've rewatched it for like over the past 15 years, my appreciation for Spider-Man 3 just grew bigger and bigger. And it made me realize that it's not that bad. I would even go so far to say that Spider-Man 3 is way better than people give it credit for. However, with that being said, the movie definitely has some issues, mainly due to the fact that it bites off more than it can chew by overloading itself with having way too many villains, from Harry Osborn's emo goblin, Sandman, and even Topher Grace, aka Eric Foreman from That 70s Show, who was horribly miscasted as Eddie Brock because of the way he makes the character look like a total pussy, as he definitely was just such a poor depiction of the character from the comics. However, even with all those flaws aside, I do believe that this movie contains some of the most crucial moments of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy because of the way how it has such a great theme about forgiveness and sustains such a touching story about the consequences of allowing oneself to be infected and governed by a wrathful disposition. Even with Spider-Man 3 not being a great film entirely, and even with it being inferior to its predecessors, I will defend it till my dying breath, and I really encourage people to give this movie another shot because I feel like it has faced a shit ton of amount of unfair backlash for the past 16 years.